Today's episode of Desertwood Days with Kathy Blaze is sponsored by Movie Group, founder of the Dream Network channel. Learn more at dreamnetworkchannel.com.
I wanna visit all the places nobody goes. I wanna teach all the things that nobody knows. I wanna grow wings, leave the coop, learn to fly. Bungee jump from the tallest building in Dubai. I wanna fly around town in my UFO. I wanna eat real food, not the GMOs. I wanna make moves, call the shots like the boss. I wanna love like I never lost.
Welcome back to Desertwood Days, and I am your host, Kathy Blaze. Today we have an amazing guest for you. Her name is Dr. Marci Batiste, author of Surviving the Rain to Find the Rainbow. Let's welcome Dr. Marci Batiste. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, dear. How are you?
Good to see you.
Oh, you too. It's been forever.
Yes, I love your butterfly.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of representative of my story of transformation and healing. So
Yes. So, Marci,
Yes,
are you a
ma'am.
native of Arizona?
No.
Where are you from?
I am originally from Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay.
I moved here in 2008. It was a career transfer,
Okay.
and it's funny because when I landed here, I told myself, now that you're in Arizona, you can be whatever you want to be.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to start fresh. So
New slate.
Yep.
That is awesome. Wow. I think it's been about 6-7 years since I've seen you last, and that happened to be at a book signing event. And I recall, I believe you were working on your first book at that moment, or you were talking about it, or you were telling your story that day. And from that point on, you have written how many books?
I have 17 complete of my own, and then 2 collaborations on some other people's book projects, and then I've got, I think, 3 in process. I'm not proud of the 3 in process, but we'll get there.
Well, your story, I want to give a little bio on you. It's a sensitive subject, but it is a subject that has to be told over and over and over again until it stops. Okay, so why don't you give us a little bio about what these mean to you and how you got started here?
Okay, so my start and my experience with domestic violence in particular started very small. I was 6 years old. My mother was in an abusive relationship with a man who was also an alcoholic, and she was with him for about 7 years. And during that time, it was like clockwork. Every Friday, she would cash her paycheck. We'd go get dinner. He always wanted Kentucky Fried Chicken. And then we'd go home. We'd eat dinner as a family. And then he would leave for the evening. And invariably in the middle of the night, I would hear him come in and he'd immediately start pounding on my mom. So that was my first experience with domestic violence. And a lot of times things that we go through put tracks in our minds.
Right.
And so observing that, I said to myself, so I can't do this. But throughout that process, that's when writing started, because I felt like I didn't have a voice as a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, to be able to try and communicate what I was feeling and how this, how much it hurt me and how betrayed I felt that she would tell me that we were leaving and then we never would leave. And so I began journaling, and then I also would, in moments when I was extremely upset, I would write her letters. And what I realized was writing her letters gave me an opportunity to get it out when I felt safe.
Right.
And it gave her an opportunity to read it when she felt safe.
Right.
And then sometimes we would talk about him and sometimes we wouldn't. Sometimes I was way out of line as a child, you know, totally stepping outside of a child's place. But, you know, you're put into a position where you can no longer have the benefit of just being a child.
Right.
Right? So I ran away from home at 13 because of that. And then I told her I would come back if she made him move out. After several months, she finally did. I came back home. And that put another track in my mind that said, because she kept saying, I don't know if I can do this on my own. I don't know if I can afford things on my own, like to support us. And
So
so in
you've
my
gone through
mind,
that for so long.
yeah, I mean, 7 years, like you're beat regularly every single Friday and Saturday, right? And so I said to myself, well, as long as you're financially responsible and you're able to take care of yourself, like you'll never have to worry about that. You'll never be in that position. It'll never happen to you. You'll never be in an abusive relationship because you know better. That's at 13. But that financial track stuck with me. And so I've always made sure that I'm not financially linked to anyone. And so from there, fast forward through a marriage and kids and divorce and a whole bunch of toxic relationships that followed the marriage, I found myself in a physically violent relationship. And the ones prior to that were abusive in different ways, right? So you've got emotional abuse, you got psychological, you've got all kinds of stuff. But the physical one was the only time that I recognized that it was abuse.
Because that was what you were used to seeing.
That's what I was used to. So I knew hitting is wrong. I was very clear about that. I wasn't as clear about like life with a narcissist and psychological abuse. Like I didn't even know what those things were. So the night that I got attacked was April 17th, 2012. And it changed everything for me. Because I remember standing in the mirror that night and I'm looking like, how did I get here? And you know better. You knew better, you know better. Why aren't you doing better?
Right.
Something has to change. Right? And so for me at that point,
This is where challenge to change came from.
Yeah, that's where challenge to change. That is all of this culminated in this curriculum. But I didn't know how to change. The only thing that I knew was if I was in another abusive relationship, I would probably end up dead because I almost died this first time. And then the other thing that I knew was I was the common denominator of my problems. So it's hard to swallow that you're part of the problem, but if you're the problem, then you have the ability to change your outcomes. You have the ability to change your life, change your circumstance by changing your choices. And so it wasn't long after that I met a mentor. We were talking about my domestic violence platform and public speaking and motivational and advocacy and all those kinds of things. And so that was the spark for my first book, which was called Journey to Find Your Butterfly Potential. And I walked everyone through my life experiences. And I told all the nasty, dirty little truths. And it was hard. And it was one of those things where when I sent it to the editor, one of my other mentors called and he's like, hey, how are you doing? And I was like, I just sent the book off to the editor. And he's like, oh my gosh, congratulations, that's so great. And I'm like, he's like, how do you feel? I said, I feel like I want to cry.
Right.
But it was hard going through that writing process of that book because I had to go back into all those ugly little spaces and places and, think about those people and think about being molested and having an abortion and, all of these things.
And then you put all that into someone else's hands.
Right.
Yes. You had to trust someone else with all your feelings, your emotions, everything.
And that's what he said. He said, so why aren't you happy? And I said, because there's stuff in there that nobody knows about me.
Right.
You know, we work really hard, especially in the social media environment, to create
This.
the imagery
Yes.
and to develop this persona.
Right.
But what about all those shattered, wilted, dark pieces?
Those
that
are the
remain,
ones that we
right?
keep hidden in the back, in the closet.
Yes.
We don't put that out for the world to see.
Right. And
Yeah.
so that first book, once I learned that, and like I tell my author coaching clients all the time, once you know the formula and you have a format, you can replicate it because everything that you're telling is coming from you.
Right.
You know, so you don't have to remember, or you just have to recall, and you have to be courageous enough to go to those places and think about those things and then to be able to share them.
And the thing with that, it means reliving it. That is a lot to share with others that may be going through what you went through or will go through. So maybe you will prevent a lot of people from having to go through that by sharing your stories. And we were talking about the imagery that we put out on social media, the smiles, the good times, the things that's going well. But even though we're smiling and showing that, there's still so much back here that we're not putting out there that we have to deal with. And that was what you had to deal with in order to get to this.
Yeah, you know, I say all the time that social media is the highlight reels. Our real life is the cut room scraps. It's all the stuff that people don't see. And so whether it's doing a show like this, being your guest, whether it's my Voiceless to Victorious podcast, I just feel that everybody's story has value.
Right.
And you just never know what people are going through. You know, I started my nonprofit 9 Seconds specifically for domestic violence prevention. And sometimes people hear prevention and they think to keep it from ever happening.
Right.
But prevention is twofold. Yes, you want to prevent it from ever happening if you can.
Right.
But the unfortunate reality is for most people, particularly most women, it's already happened. And so how do we now prevent it from continuing? How do we prevent it from getting worse?
As you stated, your mother went through it for quite a few years. You started from age, was it 6?
I was 6 at the time.
Age 6, a 6-year-old having to witness this and hear these things and see these things. And at 13, leaving home, which is, I couldn't imagine my daughter leaving home at 13. I couldn't imagine that, and being out there in the world alone.
Well, you know, fortunately, I didn't have the homeless story that goes with that. I did find a stable landing place.
Okay,
I was able to stay with my aunt and uncle for a period of months while my mom was trying to figure this out. But, you know, it was a situation, and the reason why it escalated to that point was because that particular night he had tried to hit me because I tried to intervene and stop him from hitting my mother.
And that usually happens.
Yeah, and you know, at that point I was like, oh, like, no. And
you just sound like such a little lady at that age.
Well, I was raised as an only child, so I had a very adult, like, you know, you get enmeshed in these adult conversations and like you hear a lot of stuff that you shouldn't hear, and you see a lot of stuff that you shouldn't see when you're raised that way. And so, but like I internalized so many things, and I owned other people's choices, and I owned my mom's choices, and I owned all this stuff. But ironically, it wasn't until after I had started my first nonprofit, I had written Journey to Find Your Butterfly Potential, and I was actually doing a video for my YouTube channel where I was talking about my story. And it was the first time that I put pictures of myself as an abused woman. So the pictures from the weeks following my assault. And so they were intertwined in this video. But literally, as I'm talking about it in the video, for the first time, I realized your mom is a survivor.
Yes.
And I was just like, whoa. because I had always put her in the realm, and I went by her title, mom.
Right.
So I had these expectations that went with what I felt a mom should do for their daughter.
Right.
And suddenly I was like, she's every woman that you're trying to help.
Mm-hmm.
She's a survivor. And so I had to then begin to process through that, like, you were really hard on her, because I didn't understand. I mean, 6, 13, like, you don't understand.
Yeah, that's true. And you know what? And a lot of times, as you just stated, we're hard on that parent, but we don't realize what they've gone through in their life. I mean, what it was like for her as a child. I mean, if she's ever witnessed abuse, or I mean, if she was abused we just don't know what they've gone through as a child. So, out of all your books, is there one that touches you the most?
I would really have to say the new book, Challenge to Change. It's a whole sustainable life curriculum that I've created. There's 5 books in total with it, workbooks, journals, the coloring book. And the reason why that's the thing is because what I realized through, like, each one of the books was a different avenue of being able to help women process and heal through like dysfunction and relationship issues and insecurities and self-esteem issues. Like, I was almost 400 pounds at one point, and I thought like a 400-pound woman even after I lost 200 pounds.
Right.
I gained 50 back, but shit.
We won't tell anyone.
Don't tell anybody. But that the thing that holds them all together is being willing to change. I've never been afraid to change. I've never been afraid to try something new. I've never been afraid to say I'm wrong. I've never been able to say I don't know. I've never been able to say, hey, I need some more information. Never been afraid to, sometimes I don't really like asking for help, if I'm honest. But I've learned to ask for it when I need it.
Right.
And so Challenge to Change is exactly what you were just talking about, where we think about, we forget to think about what have people been through. And so we are representative of our experiences, but our experiences don't define us. And so Challenge to Change takes a generational review process, right? And we walk participants through it. So we're using it in treatment centers for substance abuse. We're using it for DV recovery. You can use it for any type of life change that you want to do, but we take a generational review and say, let's go back to your generational system of origin. So that's where you're born. 0 to 6, critical time period. Like, you learn the most in those years. You think, learn to eat, walk, talk, think, process, communicate. All in that, short span. So we walk you all the way through that and we say, okay, what beliefs came from that? What behaviors did you develop? Who did you learn them from? How are they showing up in your life? And then once you have a full grasp of all of that, then you can start to change. But if you don't know the enemy that you're fighting, and you're fighting your generational system, like, you didn't create, you may have done things that impacted your circumstance, but generationally, how you think, how you believe, your core beliefs started before you ever got here.
Through all the work that you've done here and are continuing to do, I want to ask this question. Through this, I mean, we speak of the victims and survivors. Is there ever, I want to know if I should use the word empathy, or work being done for the abuser in all that we do? Because a lot of times, in order for the cycle to stop, we know that they're wrong, okay?
Right.
But there still has to be some empathy and some work done to prevent them from doing it again, or for them to not pass that on to their young men.
Right. And that's what Challenge to Change is about, is to say that the generational system that you were born into does not have to be the one that births from you. And so you're absolutely right. And this works for men, it works for women. But you have to treat both sides of the equation. Like on my podcast, we did a series in April for Men's Month, and we're in the middle of Men's Month again. Because to your point, who's talking to men? Who's asking them, like, what do you need? How can we help? Because, and you have to give them a safe space. Like my guest that was on 3 weeks ago, I mean, he went completely naked on the show and told all of his story for the first time. And afterwards I said, you know, I always reach out because it's sensitive. And I said, how are you feeling? He was like, man, he said, I didn't intend to go that deep. And he said, my mom was listening. You know, and the issue sometimes is that people support you, like men who are abusive, women who are abusive. If you're, you know, have addiction issues, you know, whatever, incarceration. They're supporting you, but they only know this much of your story. They only know the pieces that they saw and the pieces that you told them. They don't necessarily know the whole truth. And so for him,
the pieces that someone told them.
And for him, this was the first time out of his own mouth he told his whole truth.
And that's where it should come from, out of his mouth. That is where it should come. So, what's next for Dr. Marci?
We are preparing to do the launch for the Challenge to Change treatment program. I'm going to be working with a treatment center in Fairbanks, Alaska. They've agreed to run the beta, and so we are going to launch that and really truly dig into substance abuse. And then with I'm just about to start the support group for domestic violence survivors. And so we'll use this as a loose base for that, but obviously we're going to go deeper into some of the DV specific stuff.
And where can our audience find you?
Dr. Marci Batiste.
Dr. Marci Batiste. You heard it right here on Desertwood Days. It was such a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share.
You're welcome. And thank you for joining us here today on Desertwood Days, and we'll catch you next time.
Today's episode of Desertwood Days with Kathy Blaze was sponsored by Movie Group. Visit them at dreamnetworkchannel.com.